Hello and welcome to the DM's Book Club, a weekly podcast where we talk about some Dungeons and Dragons and how you may fit it into your role-playing campaigns. It's been a while since I've introed.
I know.
With me here is Fiona, that voice you just heard.
It's me. Hello.
Doing the dancers, we have to do the hand gestures.
Hand gestures. Yeah, everyone do the hand gestures at home. You don't know what they are, but whatever you did, it's right.
That's why I like to do like a different like intonation, like as I'm going through, because I enjoy the fact that people have to change the hand movements. That's why
it's
I like
very
it.
William Shatner. I like it.
I know it is. Yeah, I enjoy it. It's fun. It's a fun thing to do.
There's something, when we do voiceovers, they tell you, obviously, while standing up and like smiling, when you enunciate or you're trying to hit the beat, you have to do like hand gestures or like as if you're really over talking to someone. So like lots of hand gestures.
Watch my YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Like my hands are wild. I'm pointing, I'm doing this. It's like
you could do like a skit. You could do a skit where you're just talking normally, but someone else is controlling your hands and just running 100%. Everywhere like a big sort of Muppet, you know.
It's actually quite embarrassing. Like I watch it back and go, Hamilton, stop moving your fucking hands.
I've been told. There was a couple of panels where I was very excitedly using my hands, and I did get a comment afterwards going, "You don't need to use so many hand gestures." I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I was just very excited to be there."
I do it. I mean, I do it in my general like day to day, but when I'm really having to like look at camera and talk, the hands come out.
Yeah, you're like,
I'm trying to give you the information.
Because you're trying to be uplifting. Because we're recording this remotely, but also when we're recording stuff to camera, it's like we have to hype ourselves up by doing hand gestures.
Exactly.
Otherwise,
get that energy out.
you really like the stuff we talk about. Yeah, exactly. So funny. But how have you been, Hamilton? All good in your side of the Atlantic?
Yes. It's fine. It's fine. I mean, the other side of the Atlantic seems to be like washing its waters onto us every day.
Well, for now, we might give you a tariff on that. Who knows?
Give me a tariff. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's great. I'm like, the thing is, we're not shipping until December, so I'm like, is it worth doing a post? Because I've already said like, dependent on tariffs, but I'm like, it could be anything by next
who knows?
week, let alone December. So I'm like, I might say something, but I'm like, also, I might be like, hey, there are tariffs clearly, but we're way off, and I'll keep you posted. But it's,
this is for your Kickstarter, for your backer kit for Wraithborn. So it's one of those things where it's like, keeping people in the know, but it's a very odd time.
But also, I'm like, by December, it could be 100%. It could be nothing. Yeah. It could be, I don't know.
Yeah, so, you got a bit of time, so that's not too bad.
Got a bit of time. Yeah, they might ban TTRPGs. I don't know. I don't know. Who knows? Talking of authoritarian regimes.
Whoa, that segue, so smooth. Oh no, how did I know? I'm here now. Yes, I love it. Great segue.
What are we talking about today?
Oh, well, today, Hamilton, we are back in the land of Thay, the land of the Red Wizards, and we're back. Last time we looked at the people of Thay, and now we're on to chapter 2 in the source book called Ruling Thay, which is basically breaking down the sort of major authority and it's sort of political history over the last 100 and 150 years in sort of a very player-friendly, bite-sized chunk, so that if you're playing a campaign in Thay or planning an adventure in Thay with your players, then you've got the sort of gist of what's happening. It is quite a short chapter. It's quite to the point, maybe compared to the previous chapter, which was like, again, obviously it's talking about that people of Thay was talking about like cultures and cuisine, stuff like that. So there's a little bit of everything, which is, I guess, a taste like a little platter of stuff. And now it's like, boom, let's talk about the ruling stuff. And it's quite short and to the point and very good. I think it really gets across like exactly what the vibe is of Thay, which is a word I never thought I'd say about Thay, the vibes of Thay. They're rancid vibes, I will say. Let's put that at the top there.
Yeah, they're not, you just kind of threw me with the vibes because we were doing vibes images yesterday, and so I was just going back to that. But the vibes are it's got a certain particular rotting vibe going on at the moment. It's actually quite an interesting thing, and it did the whole thing of like, we need to do an episode about the spell plague. I feel because it's very central to the new world order of Thay, as it mentions like quite immediate, like on the second page after going through the general understanding of Thay and its relationship to the other realms, which is unsurprisingly not the most amenable between the two of them. The next page, as you get into it, is called the Lare. Laret.
Lara, I believe it's how it's pronounced. I mean, again, we said this a bit last time, I think, but also throughout this book, certain pronunciations are just written out, which is amazing. I thank you. Not all of them, but thank you. It's a great starting point for us people who are rubbish at pronouncing things and therefore don't pronounce things out loud in our heads, you know?
So yeah, and it mentions, as I said, like on that second page, some 150 years prior to today, as in the events of the book, an event known as the Spell Plague ripped through Faerun, magic was undone, and the weave began to spew wild threads of arcane power across the whole world. And it's through this that is like it was a big change across the whole of the Forgotten Realms, and it's and I think, as I said, like I did a little bit of Googling and maybe a book series to have a look at after, and if we find this interesting, obviously. But there's a couple of books based around the Spell Plague, but there's a specific book which is the Haunted Land series by Richard Lee Byers, which is set in the one and only Thay, and it focuses around Szass Tam and talks about an invasion of undead against Thay, and it talks about the Spell Plague in it, and it's meant to be it's got some cool front covers. I like them, but supposedly in the second book is one of the first big mentions of the Spell Plague as like part of the storylines, but there is a whole series of Spell Plague books as well. But maybe it's something that we could just look as a whole and just do a thing about what the Spell Plague did, because it actually completely changed the whole landscape of everything, magic and everything like that.
No, absolutely.
And in this regard, they being ruled by a bunch of arcane wizards, and the Spell Plague being this thing where magic is rendered into something that's completely chaotic and wild, it ruined their whole structure, basically, and left them very open to these red wizards who have not treated their nation's peoples very well. Unsurprisingly, rose up and got their own back, basically.
It's like the perfect sort of like setting for a political revolution or rebellion of some sort. So it gives us, as you rightly said, for years and years and years, Szass Tam sort of like controlled this place through the threat of violence and magic and all the red wizards, and the way that the sort of hierarchy worked was that if you showed a little bit of talent, you would be taken and be trained as a red wizard, and that's sort of like culture of fear because magic is all powerful. And then, as you said, the Spell Plague rips through all of the Forgotten Realms, but it affects Thay so much because suddenly magic becomes unreliable, and Szass Tam's sort of realizes that not only is his own magic not working, but also he has surrounded himself with this council of undead Zulkers. Again, and he realizes that, oh God, now I'm in a really tricky position, because not only is there this threat of rebellion, as you said, like suddenly red wizards are defenseless, they're getting assassinated and killed, people are rising up. And I think it's interesting because I couldn't tell if it was like in the middle of a revolution or it's in the Cold War, Civil War thing that they were sort of talking about, because it sounded like that Szass Tam is now in the middle of like recruiting and putting people, certain Zulkers in certain schools who are alive, and so that there's a little bit of creativity and a bit of thought, because obviously undead armies and undead sort of like servants and allies, they don't have any creative thought. So now he's having to be like, I trust these people to help me at this point, but I don't trust them totally. And it's not a paranoia, because the people are actively plotting against them. But I guess the real thing that's at heart is that it's about their projects and they're putting themselves first. And also, all of them really love Thay. There's still that pride, that sort of like feeling that Thay is the greatest, it's the most advanced, etc. So we will put aside our differences to make sure our country is great. And I think that's really interesting when you look at all the other sort of like realms who are watching this. And it's almost a little bit like, again, not to reference world events too much, sort of the political stuff that's been going on with like Korea in general, notably North Korea, where we don't really know what's happening in what's happening in there, and we as powers don't really do anything necessarily, because there's this threat of war, Cold War, that could happen at any moment. But then there's this Spell Plague that happens, and certainly it just feels like all these little pieces where like at any point someone could try and overthrow Szass Tam, people could declare themselves independent, and what do the great powers outside do this? Because what's interesting, and this is the thing I really want to highlight, is that Szass Tam has banned all the Zulkers from leaving Thay. They used to go out and do like political envoys, but they now can't leave, even by magical means. And I thought that was really interesting, that there's no emissaries, there's no like political visits or anything like that. So again, I was thinking of a story like maybe suddenly there was someone claiming to be from Thay doing a visit to Waterdeep or Neverwinter, and what does that mean? Because they've not had many visits for many years, and this is the first time, because there's been a political revolution or a rebellion of some sort, and the powers aren't what they seem anymore.
And it's kind of an interesting, like, a lot of this stuff I felt reading through it, as with this, was like, these are the bits that feed into your adventures and your stories that you're going to take, because it really does open everything up, as much as it is actually quite a lot of like names and people and stuff like that, which is always good, like DM fodder, stuff to have.
Absolutely.
But as much as it was like not as like revealing or interesting, because it was a lot of people like, this guy's good at abjuration. But you're right. There's those little things, like the fact that they're not allowed out. They're stuck in there. But there are a bunch of exiled Zolkirs who go around doing exactly what you're saying, sort of stating they are Zolkirs, stating they're still in this position, is that no one really knows the ins and outs of what's actually happening in Thay. So you have to kind of, some ways they're obviously probably getting away with it, some ways they're not. And then there's also the things that it talks about with like the Zentarim and their sort of relationship as a similar sort of group of people. I don't know how people know about the Zentarim, but they're led by Manshun, who is also an evil wizard.
What?
And they're all about magic. And they kind of wear dark cloaks, and they're very similar. And so, there's a lot of like little bits of tension that this builds in, and I quite like it.
No, I agree. And as you rightly said, that there's been a name for this period of the La Air, which is like the big change, life change, a new direction in life. And I thought that was really, again, cool. Because again, I mean, we have our own words for stuff that happens, like the plague, the Great Fire of London, that sort of thing that names certain periods. Obviously, the spell plague is
100 Years War.
100 Years War. So I just, again, I know it sounds really silly, but I was like, oh, yeah, of course, if I'm making a timeline of the world, I definitely want to be like, make sure that certain words, there could be, periods that, like the Tudor period, all that sort of thing. But actually, like, right now, what's happening right now? Well, we're going through the La Air. It's a big change, and it feels very relevant. Obviously, the closest one I can think of for us right now is, the pandemic. We all know what that is. We've all lived through it. That's what we call it. Obviously, Liberation Day might be another one coming up. Who knows? But it's that sort of thing where I'm like, it's cool to actually, make sure you name events. And they don't have to be like 1,000 years ago. They could be happening right now. And I just thought that was just a really, I just thought that was it's nice to have, like words to it in that sort of sense that, not like the great change, but actual like word that is in their dialect or something like that. So I just thought that was really cool.
No, it is really cool. And I think like the spell plague, a bit like the pandemic, it didn't last forever. It lasted for 10 years, I think, in total, which is a long time.
A long time, yeah.
But like the pandemic and like the wars the world wars that have happened and stuff like that, the effect on them had, like so big, the Cold War itself that we had before, like it's a similar sort of thing. That was a world war that led to the stalemate for whatever 40 odd years, basically. And it's that kind of thing. It's like, so even though the lair is sort of, the spell plague happened 150 years ago or 140 years ago, it ended at least, it's still affecting this, destabilize the thing that was held so strongly by Szass Tam, the instilling of his ideology of like undead Zolkirs and their ideology on magic. And then now he's actually, the interesting is it shows his change, as you mentioned, like he's actually had to change his thinking, try and reinstate different types of Zolkirs. And on top of that, there's this very particular person that we haven't mentioned yet called Darlon Ma, who is this separatist. It isn't public knowledge of anyone, but if someone were to talk about a Thay rebellion, they would be dismissed as crackpot or conspiracy theorists. But Szass Tam is aware of this and tolerates this separatist, which is one of his Zolkirs, who has placed himself as the Zolkir of enchantment after the previous held of Lazaril tried to motivate Mystra to strike out Szass Tam, and then Szass Tam actually tried to retaliate, and then this person, Lauzoriel, escaped. So, like, clearly the enchantment role is
it's cursed, this role,
Yeah,
and so it's not been filled as a result in the inside Thay. Yeah,
yeah, and it's like the drummer in Spinal Tap, you know,
yes.
like constantly like blowing up, and it's a. But then he's gone so far himself to create his own additional Zolkir positions, which is such a what a move, right? It's like, no, I'm not the leader, but I'm just gonna make new Zolkirs as well, and that's like, I'm quite surprised that like it's allowing this Szass Tam character to be someone who would allow this, but clearly it feels like there should be like another motivation that I haven't really found yet.
Yeah, because I was trying to work out, what does Darlon get out of like trying to unstabilize Szass Tam, which isn't just I become the new Szass Tam.
Yeah.
So I think it would be nice to be like, oh, there's something personal about it. Maybe Darlon had been overlooked for various promotions or something like that, and then
he's the brother of that lover that Szass
right
Tam,
at the beginning,
at the beginning, like left to die.
Yeah, because I was struggling as well, because I was like, so obviously he's no longer in Thay, and he's building up his own little shadow cabinet, is what I saw it as, with these different schools as well. So showing that they're different and willing to change, because like he came up with these other schools. So not only does he have like Zolkirs for enchantment, that's what he describes himself as. There's one for divination, but he's also got schools for the School of Artifice, Chronomancy, and Information, which is a school of thought, which I thought that was quite fun. I quite like that you could, again, if you were taking this into your own sort of games and home worlds, it's like, what if you could have, like, if you were taking what the structure was, like, yes, you could have the schools of magic, that totally makes sense for wizards, but like, what if you were expanding, maybe you'd have, I don't know, the school of steam, the school of electroplasm, I'm just thinking of like fantasy inventions that people go, oh, and it's like the new thing, because it's like the new coming in to supersede the old, that sort of thing. The critique I'd say about this whole chapter is that we don't really have too much on the Zolkirs necessarily. I don't think you do need too much. As you said, like, it becomes, oh, they're either undead or they're human, but maybe a woman. That's how I was differentiating between the couple of them. But, you could always add a few bits and pieces. The reason I always like a little bit more, because I'd be like, oh yeah, I definitely want to use that Zolkir to maybe recruit my adventurers to do something, to plot against Szass Tam. Because I always go back to Saltmarsh, the source book there. And in the village, you only have, like, I think 5 people on the council, but each member has a lot of information. One's corrupt, one's, I think, pretending to be somebody else, all that sort of thing. And so you have a little bit of stuff to play with. And maybe it's because there's so many of them, that maybe that's the thing. But the one thing I did wanted to say, so Szass Tam themselves, it just says at the top that yes, they're the ruler, but they'd rather prefer to do their own magical research and like deep dive into forgotten lore. It's because, ultimately at the end of the day, Szass Tam is a red wizard. He wants to be left alone. It's exactly what I feel of academia, right? People just like, I could teach, but I need to write a paper. I just want to get on with my stuff. I don't want to be bothered with this. So you have to. So I quite like the idea that you present a scene of the council, and Szass Tam's like, oh my goodness, all right. I call, just like I'm so done because he has to rule, because everyone's afraid of him and he has a certain demeanor, and maybe he was great at this like 100 years ago, but now he's just like going like, oh,
I'm fucking tired of this.
This is awful. Get me back to my books,
Well, as it says in here, like he knows that they will have many challenges in the outside world from these Zolkirs he expels, and deep down in his mind that if they return empowered and emboldened, then perhaps it is truly the will of Mystra that they should do so. So he's probably just gone apathetic, He's lived for hundreds of years, and as you said, maybe it's just like, I can't be fucked, because the location that so I did mention that Darlon Mar isn't in Thay anymore. They're in a place called Mulmaster, which is on the coast, Moon Sea, which is that little inner sea, and it's an independent city-state, and all these different. He's claimed this title of the enchantment, and then found these other different people from disparate parts around, like other Zolkirs, expelled ones, or people of just like magical ability, and sort of created this new council. Yeah, it's kind of like, you're right. As an adventurer, it's a good thing, because one of the things for like things for them to get involved in, because it says like Dahl and his compatriots have toiled long and hard to recover the lost magic from ancient Netherese ruins, mind-shattering apparent beats from the beyond the stars, dead gods, and other sources to support and further their mission. So it could just be a part of your campaign that there's this other separatist people taking these things that are hidden away in temples or places that you're adventuring in, and you get caught up in it somehow, and your relationship to like maybe you don't want Szass Tam, but then this Darlon Mar guy isn't any better.
Yeah,
but the enemy of my enemy again sort of thing comes to mind, as well as just like, or it's just like, can these guys stop stealing all the cool shit?
Yes.
you know, like
it belongs in a museum. No, it doesn't. It belongs where you left it. So, keep putting that there.
Yes, exactly. Can you stop fucking Indiana Jonesing this shit and leave it where it is? Because they're like, one of them, it says, was last seen in the Tomb of Annihilation, Tomb of Horrors, wasn't it, or Tomb of Annihilation? I can't remember which one it was.
I would say probably Annihilation, because that would make sense with the Soulmonger stuff, perhaps.
I think that's right. And there's some really interesting, like, it says you will see all these different people in other books, and I'm like, I tried to have a look at some of them.
Yeah.
So there's Window to the Past, Uncertain Scrutiny. They're obviously like famous in these old
modules
stories, which I haven't actually modules exactly. So it's sort of bringing some people back in. So if you're aware of those people, sounds interesting. I like the idea of the information one's my favorite because they've got a cool name. But
yeah, I quite like that. Yeah, I think you're right.
Dusk.
I think more code names for Zolkirs would be just always interesting, because then is that fear of like, the professor, the doctor. And you're like, that was something I did find interesting. It was that they, again, appreciate, the PDF doesn't have necessarily hyperlinks to where you could get those adventures where you see these certain Zolkirs. But again, it's very unusual for a source book currently in the last 5 years to mention where these things are. Obviously, when we looked at like Planescape, it would always say like, oh, it's in this other Planescape book, etc. But like this, I feel is a separate supplement that obviously Ed Greenwood has done, and then presumably hasn't written these adventures. So just making a nod to them is very interesting. And obviously we know that in certain D&D books recently, they are sort of making nods to it. Like I remember Glory of the Giants made some nods to certain books as well, and certain adventures that were previous as well, like the staircase and whatnot, the Infinite Staircase adventures. So yeah, I think it's really interesting, and it's always important, I think, to credit where you get your information or your inspiration from. But it's nice to see it maybe directly in the text then and there, rather than like the index or the appendix going like, here's all this stuff. I mean, both are valid. I will say, but 100%. I'm like, oh, cool. I can look up more of this person.
Exactly. It would be really useful. They seem to all be Adventure League modules. And they're on DM Skill. You can get all of those on DM Skill. And they're kind of, I think they seem to be written in and around 2019.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I can't find the date exactly for this one. Copyright 2020. Yeah, so 2020 and 2019. And so they are first, but they sound like a way of what we're just literally saying. You are known to be an ally on the Thayan Plateau, whether you want it or not. You have, and you go out and you are actually working on behalf of the Red Wizards of Thay, and trying to intercept these Zolkirs in one of them, and then the other one is you are in search of King Hecaton and you enter the Dreadland of Thay, but getting in will prove less difficult than getting out. And it's got a cool throne.
The other thing I'd say, a cool line I wrote down, because I thought it was really nice, is that no matter how much gloss is applied to a red wizard, their motives are inherently evil. And obviously that's just reinforcing what we said in the previous stuff, is that, again, they are evil. They uphold ideals of enslavement to certain folks, even though now it's going towards undead. There was again another great line which was talking about like, the danger and the increasing expense of keeping alive slaves in the time of rebellion. You're like, okay, but they are people, my friend. But yeah, so I think because this is,
I can imagine a couple of CEOs saying things very similar to that.
Yeah, as we were sort of saying, like people might go, oh yeah, Darlon, they're charming. He's going to really get rid of us, Szass Tam, but it's just going to be another replacement for them.
He's going to make Thay great again.
Thay great again. How funny. Yeah. The more we read of this book, the more sort of it feels too real in certain extents. Yeah. let's talk quickly then, because that's the bulk of this chapter is talking about the ruling faith, and I think it does a great job. Like I said, the only thing I would say as a critique would I would a little bit more about the Zolkirs. Like, there's a paragraph for each of them that are okay. They all sort of blend into one. Like I said, they either are undead and either are under the control of Szass Tam or not.
And then not enough to them.
There's not enough to them. There's not enough between them. I'd be like, this person hates that person, but really love this person because of X. You know, like, again, I like the mind map of like who likes what. Because to me, the ruling Thay stuff feels like it feels a bit Game of Thrones. Like, you had the big council and people, someone's gonna pop off, and you're like, oh shit, and then Szass Tam gets rid of him. Oh well, I will say to Szass Tam this. You know, I think you could have a really cool like political intrigue stuff. I know that's my favorite thing to talk about, but yeah, I just think a little bit more building up of the relationships between the Zolkirs would be interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's not enough of just like, I think I'd like little things like, what's their craft hobby? Do you know what I mean?
Of course, you're right. Yeah.
And like, what makes them like individual. Just a little bit more characterization would be great. Just because it's always useful when you're on the fly and you're like, you're meeting this person. They don't like Szass Tam and they're undead. That's all I got. You know, like it's not enough for like a GM who's just like, I need these quick. And here's a stat block as well would be nice. I don't know. Now you just maybe flash forward to like what kind of weird hobbies I have. Like we talked about before about like weird real estate. So you imagine like you're meeting a Zolkir who's like, sorry, I've just got to thank you, just exchange the keys. Another house, got it. Yeah, you know. But I was going to say, and a good example maybe of like weird hobbies or things to think about is in Blade 68, the new playtest stuff. I'll keep it as short as possible, but essentially after you do a heist, you and your crew go and do an activity together, and it gives a list of different activities as a sort of montage, like like the end of adventures, everyone has falafel, all that sort of thing. But shawarmas, not falafel. Sorry, different, completely different food. But like you have people taking an art class, roller skating, therapy, and then one at the bottom just says crying. So again, I'm just thinking like, what Zolkir would like a hobby that is just crying, or that laughter yoga, you know, that sort of vibe of like, oh, this is just unsettling. How unsettling can you make it because they're doing their hobby? You know, and you're meeting them. That's what I'm thinking. Just walk in whilst they're crying and then they just stop crying immediately and fine.
That felt great.
Hello. So refreshed.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
You really got to get the emotions out, you know?
They're playing like Fade Into You by Mazzy Star or something like that.
Fade Into You,
yeah. You know what I mean? Or like, I will remember you. And they're just like crying and weeping.
It's like, oh my God, yeah, sad ballads. Yeah, you'd have the Bridgerton like string quartet playing the sad tunes, and it goes, my Ten of Tot is here. You know, and they all go out and go, so, sorry, I normally have time to recover. My eyes are a little bit puffy, but and you're just there going, like, are you okay? Because, oh yes, I feel better than anything. You're like, oh my God. Maybe they have like ice cream. Anyway, getting far too down this.
They're keeping the tears in little jars and writing on them and putting them on a shelf.
Oh my God, the date of them?
Yeah, exactly. And the song and everything like that. Yeah.
That's so great. Anyway, sorry, that's completely... So I love that I did... We've gone completely off topic, but I love that.
For free, guys.
Have that for free. Have some have your evil villains when you're meeting with them, weird hobbies to make them unsettling. But the final part of this chapter talks about the sort of military might of Thay. And I think, again, it's the shortest thing. I'll be honest, it's the least interesting bit to me, because ultimately I do assume that most of the legions and stuff are undead characters. But it does talk about the idea of like, not only do you have like, well, I mean, there's some really cool images of like having these undead folks sort of walking into water and then coming up the other side and then crawling over each other, very zombie style.
Yeah.
But then anyone who is sort of pressed into service, there's different sort of like, not departments, but different sort of corp levels, as it were. We have the Thayan Knights, which is sort of more sort of melee, sort of with the army. We have the Water Fist, which is about the more naval. Look, I love the idea of the water. I love they had a really cool line about like the different kinds of like fists of like where we will attack them from. And then you have, I believe it's called the Probity.
The Probity Corps. Yeah, that's it.
Probity Corps, yes, which is, again, a little bit a part of like the secret police. And I think it's just, again, I wasn't entirely sure the need for that. Like, they had a bit more information than I really could take in. I don't know about yourself, what you thought about them, like these three departments.
What I just thought of it was that it's pretty, like the Probity... they were very much on the nose sort of things. All of these three areas. I didn't really think there was anything like that stood out as like, oh, this is so new, because they are exactly as you expect them to be. I mean, you've got the main military, which is built up of like skeletons, and if anyone wants some really good skeleton minis, I can't actually. The GW Death Rattle skeletons are like this image, like 100% that image, and they're really cool. And then you've got like the knights they're humans as well, and it kind of goes into a little bit like about how they manage their like the way that like rational battle masters across Faerûn suggest that despite Thay's staggering undead headcount, the Red Wizards must follow some kind of martial doctrine or process. Unfortunately, very little is known about the actual makeup of Thay's armies. What follows, and it's kind of like, okay, it's a lot of that sort of talking, while fielding droves of undead that do not require either rest or food affords obvious advantages, the undead bring their own set of notable drawbacks as well, primarily among them from a military standpoint being the lack of ability to think tactically. And you're just like, most of the text is that dense and not really giving you much flavor, and it goes into the ranking insignias, which you kind of joked off stream.
Yeah,
and you can kind of get it. It's just like there's just undead hordes. There's going to be a few whizwangs, like
whizwangs. Oh, that's a new insignia I don't know about.
Wizards. I was thinking like wizards going crazy. I was trying to give them a cool name, like wizards or something like that.
Wizards,
but like super wizards and wizards, and then there's people on boats. They're kind of like a navy,
Kind of.
I do this voice, kind of like a navy.
Yeah.
Wait for this exciting piece of trivia. They in military training occupy varying ranks positions as found in other traditional navies, from rigging crew to carpenter, from ensign to admiral. There's like that's as deep and lore heavy as it really gets.
Yeah.
And then you think the probity corps, you're like, okay, so they're just an inquisition. They're just
secret police, sort of
secret police, and it's kind of and it's a bit of a nothingness, and it was a bit of a slow to quick decline actually off a cliff when you hit that point.
Yeah, I guess my sort of thinking about it, how I would maybe if I was going to use them in a campaign or something like for all three of these things, is think about like certainly for the Waterfist folks, the Navy SEAL aspect of it all, like they're very organized. They go in and like they're organized and go kill the captain of a rival ship, and then they control it. So like cutting off the head of the serpent. I thought, oh, very cool. The Thay Knights, they are sort of more like bodyguards around certain Red Wizards. So again, you're like, okay, well maybe there's going to be a betrayer. Maybe you're going to infiltrate and pretend to be a bodyguard for a Red Wizard and get close to them. So there are certain things where I'm like, okay, it's definitely like that sort of the Marines, the TA, that sort of vibe to it a little bit. That's the only thing I could pull from. Is like
territorial army for those outside of the not
the UK. Yeah, exactly. No, you're right. It's so that's the only thing I could really think of. But like, it just kind of didn't give me any flavor. Like, I guess because obviously the ruling Thay, you're going to have to talk about like the sort of the political stance, etc. And then like, oh well, this is what they're using the day to day. And so like I said, the image of like the undead armies just not stopping was quite scary in this. But then I was like, but how can my players interact with this and feel that sort of dread that isn't constantly like, oh, it's another siege, or it's nothing like, so, and I felt like you get in through the different sort of military sort of like departments that the people talk about. But just to go back to your point, as you were saying, I wonder if then, when you say there's not much information about it, I wonder if that's because it is technically this book is written, or sort of is in the perspective of Elminster, sorry. And I just wonder, like, maybe there's like, oh, well, we're going to leave it up to the players to figure it out because Elminster doesn't know. And I'm just there going like, so is the voice, like this person who's having an outside perspective on Thay, does that undermine the source? But you know what I mean? Like, would it be better if it was just like a completely neutral, like, here are all the facts and all the stuff to give to your GM, but also acknowledge like, hey, you can create your own stuff. You know what I mean? That's why I was wondering if that's the reason why I don't find like that at the end of this chapter as engaging as the top bit of it, and maybe why we're losing a little bit of it is because like, oh well, we don't know because Elminster doesn't know because he's on the outside. He's not been to Thay,
But that's such a cop out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I know.
No, I know. You're right. No, I'm just saying like I haven't got anything more to say to add to it than that is just a cop out and it pisses me off.
Yeah.
That's all really like. I guess because it's just such a shame, really, isn't it?
The reason I sort of say that is because I know later in chapter 3 we have like a tour guide that goes through the places of interest, that basically their version of Volos, and so that's why I was sort of thinking to myself, oh well, they got someone on the inside. why do we have like, again, we've had with Planescape, let's have a report from somebody from the inside to talk about these specific military departments, like, and like, oh, well, we saw them do this and they were so dangerous because they did X, give us that little bit of flavor rather than going like, well, it sounds like this. You're like, just because we've had so many when we've looked at, like I said, Planescape, when we've had like the Volos Prime stuff, having their voice on it is always interesting, but it also delivers that information. Whereas this is kind of like, as you said, a bit of a cop out if you're like, well, maybe it's Elemenster, maybe that's a justification, or well, Elemenster doesn't know, so you don't get to know, I don't know.
It's exactly what it is, and it's just a shame because it was kind of like, it was getting interesting.
Yeah.
And it feels like this chapter just lets itself down a bit by just being, even in the first bit, a little bit prosaic and a little bit like, and this person and that and this, and then there's a little bit of interesting thing here, la la la, and then it was a bit, I feel like, I don't know, I'd loved if the Probity Corps, for example, had very particular like undead abilities or necromant, like like they are able to, they employ rats to go and spy on people. They have special rat spies. They use scrying, and nowhere is safe. Nowhere you are in Thay is always under constant vigil because you never know if it's like the panopticon ideology of like the fact that if you had a jail, I don't know if people know the terminology, but if you're in a jail cell, I think in one of the Keys to the Golden Vault was a panopticon.
Yes.
And like the idea is it's a jail where you only need one actual guard, but you can't see where they're looking, but you know that but then all the jail cells are around them in a dome, in a circular, like a sphere, and therefore you can't get up to no good because you could be being looked at.
Yeah,
not
at
the fact that you are at any time. It's that idea.
Yeah.
So
and I think the other prisoners could also look at you as well, so that they could always report you as well. So it's the idea that the people were watching other people. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so a few bits of that just to like increase the heightness of it and like give them, some very particular things. It's not just, it's just a Gestapo-esque thing. It's got something particular about it. It goes, the base title for any member of the Probity Court is Inquisitor. So you're just like, oh, okay. So they're just an Inquisition. You haven't even gone that far.
Yeah. The only thing I can think of to sort of make it a little bit more interesting and flavoursome is having some random tables. Me, I love my random tables. But of like, what kind of quests have you been asked to do on behalf of these Zulkirs? And then maybe like, if you join the Corps, what kind of mission, maybe you come and encounter them in the wild. What are they doing? Just to give us an example of what they're up to. And adventure seed hooks just to get us going, because that's the thing I'm missing is like, I'm sure I could think of stuff, and maybe it's later. I don't think it is though, certainly not in the first part that we're looking at specifically. Overall, I think I really like this chapter in the sense of like, it does a really good job of like, here's where we are now in the political state, and I think it keeps it nice and short and a good place to jump off. You and I think we both like, we want a little bit more. What could it be? Yeah. And then we've gone off on our own or something, which is great. But then, it's interesting what we both like, I guess. And then we go, military? Nah. No thanks. Sounds boring.
Well, it could be interesting. Yes. Well, that's the thing. And it could be, like, that's the thing. I'm looking exactly for, like, so where's there's a secret sector of the Probity Corps that are working on behalf of Darlon Mar, like, where's that bit? Just a little bit of, like, actually, there's a person that he's got on their side or has some information, or use their own information against them, or blah, 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 or turn them when they were seeking him out or his fellow people, and he's offered them this, and slowly but surely the Probity Corps actually like letting people get away with things and hiding information from Szass Tam, so he thinks he knows what's going on, but actually what's really happening is they're infiltrating. But how they've infiltrated is by getting at the people who sell the knowledge of infiltration. Like that's the trick, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
So 100%. That's kind of like, it's those kind of things that you're like, a little bit of that, please, would have been great.
Agreed.
So, but that is it for that chapter, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Oh, yeah. Thanks so much, Hamilton, for going with me yet back again to Thay. We didn't like it. It's not a nice place to go, but we thought we'd go back twice just to double check. I think I'll be up for going again for chapter 3 if you are, in terms of points of interest, because I think again, that might be gives where we get a bit more flavour. It sort of talks about the different arches, the different states of
arches. Yes, and it does go into the different Darkions as well.
Lord.
And it'd be I'm up for up for having a look at it. And there's some cool little bits of art, which is always nice to look at.
Absolutely.
And it's quite a long chapter. So I don't know how we will get through it.
We can always
one episode.
Yeah,
but...
maybe we'll have a chat off recording and see, because we might be like, we just pick some that we find really interesting in terms of the departures, or like for example, like I know the tour bit at the end, it feels quite long, but it's usually, this place, there's another tavern you should go to, but avoid this tavern. You're like, okay, thanks.
Riding goat tavern.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we'll definitely be back for one more session, maybe two, depending on how we're feeling. But in the meantime, Hamilton, where can people find you? I hear someone's gone under yet another little rebrand.
Yes, of course I have. I can't help myself. It's been 12, 13 months or whatever.
Yeah, it's been 13 months. So every year it's like, April Fools. Hamilton is now a different person. But yeah, Hamilton, where can we find your work on the internet? And if you're on social media?
Yes, you can. You can find me at new places, because I need to clarify myself, but it was more because like Kickstarter's done well, and I'm making a focus towards that. And so I wanted to just bring everything together to that, because I stupidly, when I started the Kickstarter, and you can't change your name without like a real rigmarole on Kickstarter. It's like a really big thing. You can't just like go and change it, which is kind of what I want to do. But also just because I want to focus more on all the sort of Mortborg things I'm doing and everything like that, you can find me under the moniker of Theatre Macabre. That will either be Theatre-Macabre or Theatre Macabre, all one word, anywhere now, and it is everywhere. That is everything. It means the Kickstarter's the same. It means the YouTube's the same. It means that my Instagram is actually all the same. So now everything is in one place, and I try and not change it again. But it's just because it's just silly. It's one of those things like I should have just... Hey, you know what?
Hey, we live and learn. It's all good.
I've got ADHD. I'm gonna do this. I don't really know what else to say.
I look forward to listening to this back in a year's time, and it's gone back to Hamilton as just the name.
It's just me. No. So so you can find me doing that, and you can still find the Kickstarter is still up and available. So if you want to go to the Kickstarter and search for Wraithborn, you can find that. There's also a website, www.theatremacabre.co.uk. So you can go there and you can find the things that we're doing. And that's everything. I don't know when this will be out, so things might be happening. There might be a Necromunda show on at the moment or something.
Yes. Yeah.
But that is enough of that, because we must ponder the questions of the universe, the fundamental focuses between them. And actually, something I found interesting about these things, I can change my story from being so deep and meaningful to an interesting interlude into what is the word? Illusionism? Ooh. Illusionism. Yes, here we go. Because we're going to be looking at etymology. And I found out recently that certain words in the English language used to have different spellings that were changed because of their relationship to these other words. These two words being what. So actually what was originally not spelled W-H-A-T. It was actually spelled H-W-A-T. So you should say like what? Like what? What are you saying? And I think it is also the similar for why. It should be why, right? But the words that were always WHs, and because the people who were making books originally were from Germany, they just assumed we're just being weird English people, so we're going to make all of them WH, were, when, and also where.
Hey, I love etymologic. I love this etymologic. Oh, I can't even say the word. I love this corner that you're doing. Oh, I know it's too early for me. But I want more meanings of words with Hamilton. Absolutely. What? Yes. What? I'm Fiona.
What?
What? Why? Why? Yes, me too. I mean, we're in a very interesting time, so I hope you're okay wherever you are. Why is the question I'm asking myself. When? Well, this will be out on a Wednesday, but we record anytime. You figure out when it is. Maybe you'll know by now. And where? Why? Whoa! Hi! I'm so glad you asked.
Everything's so breathy now.
What Am I Rolling is a twice monthly tabletop RPG one-shot podcast, which is hosted by me, and it includes lots of different RPG systems and interviews with game designers. We've got some live shows that are out on the feed. We've also got our Savage Worlds, which should be touch wood out at this point, touch the wood off my head. I also do Too Long Didn't Read, which is a weekly stream now, where I look for an RPG and decide if it's good, in the nice good, can it be improved? Basically what we do here on this podcast, in terms of like uniqueness, readability, and accessibility. I'm also one half of the RP Geeks as well, where we do lots of different RPG systems, because we're a nerdy TTRPG show with epic stories and fascinating facts, as has been said in the copy. Ooh. I know. I think by the time this comes out, we'll have done our Blades in the Dark series, so please go check that out. I'm very proud of it. It's, again, if you are enjoying sort of political intrigue, dark places and whatnot, go check that out. And there's a little bit of sci-fi in there as well as grim fantasy. So yeah, those are, you can find What Am I Rolling wherever you listen to podcasts. There you go.
Like this one,
absolutely. Final thing to say is, come check out the Discord as well. I keep forgetting to promote the Discord wherever I go. Come check us out. We've got Where and DM's Book Club. Hamilton obviously has got one for Theatre Macabre as well. The links to them are in our show notes.
Yes.
So come and chat to us. Talk to us what you think about Thay. Maybe less about the actual politics. No, thank you. But if you got any suggestions for RPGs that we RPGs in general, both for the DM's Book Club, but also for the GM's Book Club. I think at this point we'll have 2 episodes out by now. So we're always on the look for like what people are like, oh yeah, we'll chat about this one, because both me and Hamilton, we read lots of TTRPGs, or we're really interested in it, but it doesn't mean we're not omnipresent, all knowledgeable. We'd love to know any suggestions and stuff.
Well, the one I'd love to know more about is books in the realms that are like actual novels, because one that came to mind that I also have on my like to read but I can't get a hold of anywhere is Pages of Pain, which is a book based on the Lady of Pain, which is one of my favorite things, but I think it's actually from her perspective, which I think is weird because she's not meant to talk. But wow, it's
Troy Denning that's got here.
It's her characterization, so it's got a really cool cover of it. It's like, because it famously looks, because she lives on the edge of like Sigil, and when she turns around, she sees her labyrinthine world. She sends people to, she mazes people. That's her thing. She mazes you, which means she just sends you to her mazes. And so it shows this, exactly. But Pages of Pain is meant to be quite interesting.
I will. Yeah, I can see that. I was looking at the image just now. Oh, very interesting. Very, very cool. Well, we need to get back to our own book club at some point. So maybe if we can find a copy of that, we can have a look see as well. Yeah, that'd be fun.
If anyone's got one, let me know. I'll buy
it to Hamilton. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the DM's Book Club. But until then, we will see you on
the flip side.
Whoa, bye.
Bye.
That's that weird intonation with the hand gestures. That's what it is.
I don't know why. I was just went for it.